Imagine spending 50 years, like half a century, traveling to over 30 countries.
Right, just a massive, exhausting outward search.
Exactly. You're scrutinizing ancient religious texts, you're meditating in monasteries, you're intensely studying quantum physics, and you're doing all of this to find one single, undeniable, absolute truth.
Yeah, dedicating your entire adult life to this quest.
And then after all that, you wake up one random morning and realize that the answer you'd been looking for all over the globe was, well, it was actually the very thing looking out of your own eyes the entire time.
It's the ultimate paradox of the seeker, really.
Oh, totally.
You spend decades building this massive intellectual tower,
Yeah.
trying to reach the heavens, only to realize the foundation you're standing on is actually the destination.
That is such a wild thought. And let me tell you right up front, this is a journey into the deepest rabbit hole imaginable.
Oh, absolutely.
We are tracking a man's 50-year quest for absolute certainty. A quest that, bizarrely enough, begins with the math of quantum mechanics and culminates in a complete, terrifying, and beautiful dissolution of reality as we know it.
Yeah, and our mission today is to synthesize that lifelong journey.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack how a very specific desire for scientific material certainty inadvertently triggered this profound inward evolution.
Right.
An evolution that finally shattered his conventional human operating system during an early morning in the middle of the 2020 COVID lockdown.
Which is just crazy timing.
It really is. And we'll be analyzing what this specific event means for our conventional understanding of the self, the structural nature of reality, and what it truly means when someone says the universe is made of love.
Right, because that word gets thrown around so much. But to understand the sheer magnitude of his realization, we really have to start where the obsession began.
Yeah, the seed of it all.
And it didn't start on a meditation cushion, right? Or in an ashram. It started in a rather mundane setting, the public library.
Yeah, just a regular library.
So Joe Bandra is just 14 years old. He's wandering the aisles, not looking for God, not looking for spiritual enlightenment, and he's certainly not looking to dissolve his ego.
No, not at 14. He was looking for solid ground.
Exactly.
He wanted absolute concrete certainty about how the physical universe functioned.
Right. So he randomly pulls a physics book off the shelf. He opens it, and by what seems like just pure chance, his eyes fall on a page detailing Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
And, I mean, for a 14-year-old seeking an unshakable foundation, this is perhaps the worst possible concept to stumble upon.
Oh, for sure. It's completely destabilizing.
Because Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is not just a theory about, human ignorance. It's a fundamental property of quantum mechanics.
Right.
The principle basically states that you cannot simultaneously know both the precise position and the precise momentum of a particle.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because we often hear the word uncertainty, and we just think, it means we don't have good enough microscopes yet.
Yeah, like it's a tech problem.
Right, but that's not what Heisenberg is saying, is it?
Not at all. What's fascinating here is the actual mechanism behind the principle. It's known as the observer effect.
Okay.
So to see a subatomic particle, you have to bounce a photon off of it. But a photon has energy.
Right, it's not just passive.
Exactly. So the very act of hitting the particle with a photon to measure its position transfers energy to it, which instantly alters its momentum.
Wow.
The act of observing reality fundamentally changes the reality you are trying to observe. Certainty is physically, mathematically impossible at the bedrock level of the universe.
Man, it's like finding out the concrete foundation of your house is actually made of Jell-O.
That's a great way to put it.
And instead of just shrugging and living with a wobbly house, you decide to grab a shovel and dig until you hit absolute bedrock, even if it takes you decades.
Yeah, because most people, they read about quantum weirdness, they think, wow, atoms are crazy,
Yeah.
and then they just go eat a sandwich.
Yeah, they don't let it ruin their afternoon.
Exactly. Because on a macroscopic level, the uncertainty principle doesn't really seem to affect us. Cars still stop at red lights, gravity still holds us to the earth.
Right.
But Joe's reaction was entirely different. He possessed this deeply philosophical mind even at 14. He extrapolated the quantum reality to a universal truth.
Right. If uncertainty is baked into the very building blocks of existence, if matter itself cannot be pinned down, then is there anything, anywhere, that is absolutely certain?
Yeah, that question just lodged itself in his brain.
It became the hidden operating system running in the background of his entire life. Think about your own uncertainty principle moments.
No, that's a good prompt.
Have you ever encountered a piece of information or maybe experienced a sudden loss that completely shook a fundamental assumption you held about how the world works?
Because when that happens, the human reflex is usually to patch the hole as quickly as possible.
Right, just cover it up.
We find a new belief system, a new distraction, a new comforting narrative, and we just keep walking. We really don't want to look into the void.
No, we don't. But Joe decided to stare right into the void. And that decision is what turned him into this relentless, globe-trotting seeker.
Yeah, he couldn't just let it go.
Because you simply cannot answer a question like, what is absolutely certain, by browsing the encyclopedia in your local library. You have to go out into the world.
And the sheer scope of his external search over the next several decades is just staggering.
It really is.
He believed that if certainty existed, someone, somewhere in human history must have documented it.
So he transforms into this insatiable intellectual and spiritual traveler. He visits over 30 countries. He stands before the pyramids in Egypt, trying to decode the permanence of ancient architecture.
Yeah.
He walks through temples in India, visits secluded monasteries, and even journeys deep into the Himalayas.
And his intellectual consumption matched his physical travels, too. I mean, he didn't abandon science. He dove deeper into physics. He studied the great Western philosophers. He immersed himself in psychology.
On a religion, right.
Oh, heavily. He exhaustively investigated the world's religious traditions. Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Sikhism, Sufism, Christian Science, Advaita Vedanta, Zen Buddhism.
He was basically crowdsourcing the meaning of life from every major thinker and mystic in human history.
Yeah, that's exactly what he was doing.
But here's the tragic irony of that approach. What did he actually find? The deeper he dug, the more he encountered a massive, paralyzing web of contradictions.
He discovered the unifying frustration of all intellectual seeking. The greatest minds in history fundamentally disagreed on the nature of reality.
Right.
Scientists operated on material reductionism, asserted that everything is just dead matter bumping into dead matter.
Oh.
Theologians argued for a dualistic universe, with a separate creator managing a created world. Eastern philosophies offered a completely different paradigm of cyclical existence and non-attachment. Even within single traditions, sects warred over interpretations.
Yeah. If you are desperately searching for one single thread of absolute certainty, diving into the history of human thought is a nightmare. It's just a chaotic chorus of brilliant people screaming conflicting ideas at each other.
It really is. Beneath all the screaming, beneath the contradictory dogmas and the conflicting mathematical models, Joe noticed a pattern.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
A subtle shared intuition across these disparate traditions. The text refers to it as a common whisper.
A common whisper. A pointing towards something that could not be put into words.
Yes.
It's like they were all standing in different locations, describing entirely different landscapes, but they were all pointing their fingers at the exact same moon in the sky.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it. Zen Buddhism pointed to no mind. Advaita Vedanta pointed to Brahman, the ultimate unchanging reality.
Yeah.
Christian mystics wrote of the cloud of unknowing.
Right.
They all seem to agree that the certainty Joe was looking for could not be captured in a concept, a book, or a dogma. It had to be experienced directly.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. We usually think of a search for meaning as an additive process, right?
Gathering more stuff.
You gather more data, you read another book, you learn another language, you master another meditation technique, you keep adding bricks to your tower of knowledge.
Right.
But Joe's journey, as he aged, did the exact opposite. His quest actually started shedding data. They were getting smaller, tighter. The evolution of his core question is basically a masterclass in philosophical distillation.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Tracing that evolution reveals the entire trajectory of his mind. At 14, his question was broad, external, and objective. What is certain?
By age 25, after seeing the contradictions of the world, the question tightened into an epistemological problem. What can be known?
Right, narrowing it down. And then moving into his 40s, the focus shifted entirely away from the objects of knowledge. He stopped asking what was out there and turned the spotlight around to ask, who is the knower?
And finally, by age 60, all the conceptual baggage just falls away, leaving only the raw existential root. Who am I?
The scope narrows from the entire physical universe down to the very center of conscious experience.
It makes you wonder, why is it human nature to look out there under pyramids and in sacred texts before we ever think to look inward? Why is that our default?
Well, because turning the search inward is fundamentally terrifying to the ego.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. Out in the world, in the realm of objects and ideas, your identity remains completely safe. You can
Yeah.
proudly wear the label of the seeker, the scholar, the world traveler. You are the protagonist of a grand spiritual adventure.
Okay, I see. You get to play Indiana Jones, but with spirituality. You're the hero gathering mystical artifacts of knowledge.
Exactly. But when you turn the search inward and ask, who is the knower? You are interrogating the protagonist. You are placing the seeker themselves under the microscope.
Wow.
And the terrifying risk of that inquiry is that the seeker might turn out to be an illusion.
And that ruthless inward turn is exactly what brought Joe to his massive pre-awakening insight. This is the bedrock he finally hit beneath the jello. He realized that in the realm of form and phenomena, absolutely everything changes.
Right. The impermanence of all things is a central tenet of many philosophies, but Joe experienced it as an undeniable, literal truth of physics and biology.
I mean, think about the sheer scale of change in a single human life. Our bodies are entirely different than they were a decade ago. Cellular regeneration means you are physically not the same person.
Yeah, scientifically speaking.
Our emotional weather changes by the hour we oscillate between profound grief and ecstatic joy.
And intellectual structures collapse and rebuild too.
Yeah.
The beliefs Joe held fiercely at 25 were completely different from his worldview at 40. Relationships begin and end. Societies transform. Entire civilizations and star systems rise and fall into dust.
Nothing in the world of form, nothing you can touch, see, or conceptualize possesses absolute certainty.
No.
But amidst this chaotic, swirling hurricane of constant change, Joe found the eye of the storm. From the library at 14 to the Himalayas at 25 to wherever he was sitting at 60, one single solitary thing remained completely identical.
Awareness itself.
Just the raw, naked fact of being aware.
And Joe makes a vital philosophical distinction here. The certainty he had spent 50 years searching for was never going to be an object of his experience. It was the knower of all objects.
It wasn't a specific thought he needed to have. It was the invisible space that knows the thought is happening.
Consider every experience he had gathered. Standing in the Egyptian desert, deciphering a physics equation, feeling the frustration of contradictory theology, every single one of those events arose, existed for a time, and then vanished. But they all appeared within the exact same field of awareness. The experiences changed, but the awareness registering them was entirely untouched.
I really want you, the listener, to test this in your own direct experience right now. Brought to mind a vivid memory of yourself at 10 years old.
That's a great exercise.
Picture the room you were in, maybe a classroom or your childhood bedroom. Remember what you were worried about back then. Remember what made you happy. Now, drop that memory and feel yourself sitting exactly where you are right now.
The physical environment is entirely different. The body you are inhabiting is larger, older, operating with different chemistry.
Right.
The anxieties and hopes of that 10-year-old are likely completely alien to your current mind.
But the you that was looking out of those 10-year-old eyes, that fundamental silent hum of presence, that basic feeling of I am awake, is exactly the identical presence looking out of your eyes right now.
It hasn't aged a single second.
Exactly. It hasn't acquired a shape, a color, or a weight.
It is the screen upon which the movie of your life is playing. The movie might switch from a lighthearted comedy to a devastating tragedy. The characters will age and die. The setting will jump from a library to a grocery store.
But the screen itself is never burned by the fire in the movie, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nor made wet by the rain in the movie. It is the unalterable constant.
Intellectually, Joe had finally found his certainty. He had built the foundation. But understanding something intellectually is like reading a detailed map of the Grand Canyon. It's accurate, it's true, but it is not the same as standing on the edge and feeling the vertigo of the massive drop-off.
Yeah, the intellectual framework prepared his mind, but it could not cause what happened next.
Because what happened next was an explosive, involuntary event that shattered all intellectual categorization. Let's set the stage for this event, because the surrounding context is intensely dramatic. The date is April 15th, 2020.
The entire planet is locked in the terrifying early grip of the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's hard to overstate the atmospheric dread of that specific time. Cities were ghost towns. The global economy was in freefall. People were trapped in their homes, sanitizing groceries, terrified of an invisible threat.
Yeah, humanity was collectively experiencing a massive macro-level uncertainty principle.
Wow, that's so true. The illusion of control that modern society relies upon had vanished overnight. The world's foundation was revealed to be jello.
Yet amidst this global suspension of normalcy, surrounded by the collective fear of their community, And it is in this pressure cooker of global anxiety that Joe's internal reality finally snaps.
The source material is very specific about the timestamp, isn't it?
It is. It's 4:18 a.m.
4:18 a.m. Joe is in bed. But the phrasing he uses to describe this moment is critical. He does not say, I woke up and realized something. He writes, I did not wake up. I was awakened.
And that shift into the passive voice is the most important linguistic clue in the text. It signifies a total surrender of agency.
Right.
This wasn't a meditation technique he successfully executed. It wasn't a philosophical puzzle he finally solved. It was an event that happened to the organism, or rather, reality revealed itself through the organism.
We all know the mundane mechanics of waking up. You open your eyes, your vision is blurry, you feel a bit disoriented, and then over a few seconds, the cognitive software of your identity boots up.
Yeah, you remember who you are.
You remember your name, your location, the pandemic outside, your schedule for the day. The story of you reassembles itself from memory.
The ego constructs the boundary between me in this bed and the world out there.
But at 4:18 a.m., for Joe Bandra, the software simply refused to boot up. The story of Joe did not reassemble.
No.
There was no transition from a dream state into a centralized personal waking state.
The conventional architecture of human perception collapsed. The feeling of being a separate entity, a ghost piloting a meat machine, looking out through the windows of the eyes at an alien universe, that entire paradigm vanished instantaneously.
Let's really drill down into the phenomenological examples he provides because they are incredibly difficult to wrap the mind around.
They are very bizarre.
Joe's eyes open, he looks at the digital clock in the room, and he experiences an absolute glitch in the matrix.
He finds himself entirely unable to distinguish whether he is looking at the clock or if the clock is looking at him.
Wait, what?
Yeah. He then shifts his gaze to the window, looking out at the trees in the pre-dawn darkness. And the exact same impossible phenomenon occurs. He cannot tell if he's perceiving the trees or if the trees are perceiving him.
Okay, I genuinely need to play the skeptic here because this breaks my brain. How is that even conceptualized? If I am a tree, why can't I feel the wind rustling through my leaves? If the observer is gone, how is there still an experience of the room happening?
Right, it requires us to completely dismantle our assumptions about where consciousness is located.
Okay.
In normal dualistic consciousness, we operate on a subject-object split. I am the subject, located firmly behind my eyes. The tree is the object, located 50 feet away in the yard. Space and separation divide us.
Subject, verb, object. I see the tree. It's the basis of all human language.
Exactly. But what Joe experienced was the sudden revelation that consciousness is not generated by the brain, nor is it trapped inside the skull.
Okay.
The brain is more like a localized receiver tuning into a universal field of consciousness. When the artificial boundary of the ego drops, the subject-object split evaporates.
So it's not that Joe, the human, suddenly gained the sensory nervous system of a maple tree.
No, not at all. It's that the localized identity called Joe ceased to exist as a separate viewer. There was no Joe in the tree. There was only the unified field of seeing.
Wow.
The tree was arising in the exact same field of awareness that the body was arising in. They were made of the same fundamental substance.
It's like, okay, imagine you've been forced to wear an incredibly advanced virtual reality headset since the moment you were born. You don't know it's a headset.
Okay, I'm with you.
The screens inside display a character, a body, walking around a digitally rendered room. You believe with every fiber of your being that you are that character.
You identify completely with the localized avatar.
Yes. And then, at 4:18 a.m., the headset is violently ripped off your face. But the realization isn't just that the digital game was fake. The terrifying, awe-inspiring realization is that you aren't even a human being who was wearing a headset. You realize you are the entire room.
Yes.
The avatar was just a tiny, localized focal point within your vastness. So when Joe looked at the clock, there was no distance between his awareness and the clock because both were arising within him.
That is a highly accurate way to frame non-dual awareness. The document connects this direct experience to the insights of several major historical figures who tried to articulate this exact state.
Jiddu Krishnamurti is prominently mentioned in the text, right?
He is. Krishnamurti famously summarized his entire philosophy in the phrase, "The observer is the observed."
The observer is the observed.
Right. He argued relentlessly that the division between the thinker and the thought, the experiencer and the experience, is a destructive hallucination created by thought itself.
And the text also references Ramana Maharshi and Rumi.
Yeah, Ramana Maharshi taught the method of self-inquiry. relentlessly asking, who am I? Specifically to trace the I thought back to its source, where it dissolves into universal presence.
Right.
And the Sufi mystic Rumi wrote endless poetry about the drop of water slipping back into the ocean, the lover dissolving completely into the beloved until no distinction remains.
But the document is extraordinarily careful to point out a major difference between reading those philosophers and what happened to Joe.
Very careful. Because at 4:18 a.m., Joe was not lying in the dark having a fascinating intellectual realization. He was not cross-referencing his experience with Rumi's poetry.
Right, there was no mind left to cross-reference anything.
Precisely. To make a comparison requires a subject to evaluate two separate objects. Joe had no subject left. There was only unmediated, raw, blazing reality.
Wow.
The philosophical contextualization only occurred much later, when he was forced to try and translate the untranslatable into English.
So if the observer is completely dissolved, if that boundary is gone, what is left in its place? If the universe isn't made of a subject looking at an object, what is the actual substance of the room? What is it all made of?
There's where the source material introduces the most shocking and potentially the most misunderstood revelation of the entire document.
Okay.
When the illusion of separation fell away, the unified reality that remained was composed entirely of one thing: love.
Love.
But we have to immediately deconstruct what that word means in this context, because the text warns that our conventional understanding of love is entirely inadequate.
Yeah, I have to push back here. Hard.
Go for it.
Because everything is love sounds like something stitched on a throw pillow in a beach house, you know? It sounds like a generic, feel-good, hippie cliche. How does the text differentiate this from just a fleeting, euphoric emotion he experienced? Because his brain chemistry got weird during a stressful pandemic.
That is the crucial question. If it was an emotion, it would have passed. But Joe is not making a poetic metaphor about his feelings. He is making a literal ontological claim about the structural physics of reality.
He is basically asserting a new law of thermodynamics.
In a way, yes. To understand it, we must first look at how humanity normally operates with the word love. Conventional human love is fundamentally dualistic and transactional.
Transactional.
Yeah, it requires two separate entities, a lover and a beloved.
Oh, I see. It's an energy that bridges a gap, like I love my partner, I love my dog, I love this pizza.
And because it bridges a gap, it is conditional. It is based on preference, attachment, and emotional dependency. I love you because you make me feel safe. I love you as long as you behave the way I want. If the object of your love changes or leaves, that love rapidly metastasizes into grief, anger, or hatred.
Which proves it was never an absolute reality. It was just a temporary emotional state based on conditions.
Exactly. But the love Joe woke up to at 4:18 a.m. had absolutely no opposite.
Yeah.
Because there were no separate entities left to negotiate a transaction, there was no one to generate the feeling, and no object to receive it.
The document is so stark about this. It says the digital clock was love. The trees outside the window were love. The physical walls of the room, the silence in the air, the very seeing itself. The very seeing itself, it was all woven from the fabric of love.
Think of it like gravity. Gravity isn't an affectionate emotion that the Earth feels for the moon.
Right.
It is a fundamental structural reality that binds mass together into a cohesive universe. Joe is describing love in this exact manner. God is not a massive entity in the sky who feels love for humanity.
Okay.
God is love, and love is reality. It is the unbreakable, unified ground of being from which all temporary forms arise.
Let's talk about the morning after the awakening, because this abstract concept collides head-on with domestic reality. A few hours after 4:18 a.m., the sun is up. Joe walks into the bathroom.
Yeah.
Kim is standing there, getting ready for the day. She is preparing to go manage an essential grocery store in a world panicked by a deadly virus.
And Joe looks at her and utters a sentence that he admits surprised his own vocal cords.
He says, "What we know of love is not love at all. Love is something very different."
And then he stops speaking. The document notes that he felt any further elaboration would instantly falsify the reality.
It is such an intense dividing line. It's the moment the intellectual spiritual search dies and direct, localized realization takes over. And you're right. I want the listener to actually pause and evaluate their own definitions right now.
It's important to do.
Think about the things and people you claim to love. How much of that is actually just a desperate need for security? How much is preference? We hold on to these attachments so tightly, terrified of losing them.
Very true.
But Joe is saying that the true substance of love is what remains when you let go of every attachment, including the attachment to your own identity.
It is a love that does not bind. because it recognizes no separation to begin with.
Now, an experience this overwhelmingly radical, seeing the literal fabric of the universe as non-dual love, doesn't just fade away by lunchtime. You don't see the underlying code of the Matrix and then just shrug and go stop shelves in aisle 4.
No, you don't. The awakening fundamentally rewired Joe's consciousness for an extended, highly vulnerable period. The text details a remarkable 30-day aftermath,
38.
a full month,
Yeah.
where ordinary human reality essentially ceased to compute.
During this month, all the standard human drives just evaporate, right?
Yeah.
Identity becomes irrelevant. He loses all interest in the normal mechanisms of distraction. No television, no media, no ambition, no entertainment.
He even lost the desire for conversation. He
Yeah.
simply wanted to exist in silence.
And he describes his emotional state not as euphoric excitement, but as a profound, immovable stillness.
And that distinction is vital. Excitement implies a spike in energy, a peak experience that, by the laws of duality, must inevitably be followed by a valley.
Right, what goes up must come down.
Exactly. Excitement is exhausting. Stillness, however, implies absolute completeness.
He realized nothing was missing. The engine of desire shut down because there was nothing left to acquire. You don't need to add anything to reality, and you don't need to fix it. It is perfectly whole, exactly as it presents itself in the current moment.
But operating in modern society in a state of desireless, non-dual stillness is incredibly difficult.
It borders on impossible.
Yeah.
If you start walking around your neighborhood declaring that you are the trees and the digital clocks are made of boundless love, society has mechanisms for dealing with you.
Yeah, they do.
And they usually involve a padded room.
Which brings us to the most human grounding element of this entire narrative, Kim. Her role in this document is paramount.
Because while Joe is floating in this unified ocean of silent love, gravity still exists. The rent on the grocery store still needs to be paid. Employees are relying on them. The pandemic is raging. Someone has to anchor the physical reality.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the document emphasizes that Kim remained perfectly grounded. She stayed intimately by his side, but more importantly, she never judged the bizarre behavioral changes he was exhibiting.
She didn't panic. She didn't try to logicalize his experience or force him into a therapist's office. She didn't try to violently pull him back down to normality.
Spiritual awakenings of this magnitude can trigger massive psychological crises. When the ego completely collapses, if the organism is not held in a supportive, secure environment, it can easily lead to psychosis or institutionalization.
Wow. But she honored the silence. She actively protected his space, taking time away from the business to ensure he had the physical and emotional safety to integrate this shattered reality.
The document explicitly labels her presence as an expression of grace. Not grace as a mystical, supernatural intervention with glowing lights, but the deeply pragmatic, quiet grace of a human partner holding the tether while you explore the outer limits of consciousness.
It is a beautiful testament to their partnership, and it's precisely during this 30-day cocoon of grace and stillness that a strange, almost serendipitous event happens involving a specific book.
Yes. The text highlights a book titled The Disappearance of the Universe.
The backstory here is almost comical. For over a decade, Kim had been nudging Joe to read this book. And for 10 years, Joe, the great intellectual seeker, the man studying quantum mechanics and Zen koans, completely dismissed it.
Yeah, he ignored it.
He didn't have time for her book recommendation. He was busy trying to figure out the universe on his own terms.
But a few days into his profound post-awakening stillness, an internal instruction surfaces. The source material is careful to clarify that this was not an auditory hallucination. It wasn't a booming voice from the sky. It was a direct knowing, a clear, undeniable prompt. Read the book.
The irony is rich. He asks Kim for the book, and after pushing it on him for 10 years, she had literally just lent it to an employee.
Of course.
But they retrieve it. Joe sits down, opens the pages, and experiences an overwhelming shock of recognition.
The text describes it as encountering in written language exactly what had already been directly revealed to him in silent experience.
We have to be crystal clear on the causality here because it's a trap many seekers fall into. The book did not cause the awakening.
Absolutely not. The realization occurred spontaneously at 4:18 a.m. on April 15th, independent of any text.
What the book provided was the linguistic architecture. It gave him the vocabulary to process an event that inherently defies language. It's the difference between reading a menu and eating the meal.
That's a great analogy.
For 50 years, Joe had been in the library and in the ashrams, obsessively reading the menus of all the world's religions. He knew the descriptions of the food perfectly. But at 4:18 a.m., the menu vanished, and reality shoved the actual meal down his throat.
And reading The Disappearance of the Universe was like suddenly finding a new menu that perfectly articulated the complex flavor profile of the meal he was still digesting.
Right.
He recognized the truth of the author's pointers because he had directly tasted the territory.
Armed with this new vocabulary, Joe was finally able to systematize the aftermath of his awakening. He could articulate exactly how this paradigm shift utterly destroyed and rebuilt his understanding of humanity's oldest institutions.
Specifically, it forced a radical reframing of his views on God, the function of religion, and the mechanics of prayer.
Let's dig into his theological background because the contrast is stark. Joe was raised in a traditional Christian environment. He attended Sunday school, eventually taught Sunday school, read the Bible faithfully, and prayed in the conventional manner. He held the mental image of God that billions of people currently hold.
The anthropomorphic image. An ancient divine patriarch residing in a distinct location called heaven. A cosmic judge monitoring human behavior from afar, tallying sins, weighing worthiness, and dispensing arbitrary blessings or punishments based on supplication.
The ultimate dualistic setup, the creator over there, the creation down here. But the 4:14 a.m. realization annihilated that dualism instantly.
He saw with terrifying clarity that God is not a being with attributes. God is being itself.
God is not a supreme consciousness floating in space. God is the invisible fabric of consciousness itself.
God does not stand outside of the universe tinkering with the gears of creation.
Yeah.
God is a creative principle expressing itself entirely as the creation. The creator and the created are indistinguishable.
To make this abstract concept digestible, the source document leans heavily on a classic, profoundly elegant metaphor. The metaphor of the ocean and the wave. Let's really explore the fluid dynamics of this analogy because it unlocks the entire second half of Joe's philosophy.
Okay, picture a vast, shoreless ocean. Deep, quiet, and unified. Now the wind kicks up and a single wave rises on the surface.
Got it.
If you look at that wave from a distance, it appears to possess a distinct, separate identity. It has a unique height, a specific curve, a localized momentum. It seems to be an independent entity traveling across the water.
It has a birth when it swells, a lifespan as it moves, and a death when it crashes onto the sand.
Exactly. But if you pause and ask, what is the actual physical substance of that wave? The answer is just water. It is composed of the exact same H2O molecules as the abyssal depths beneath it.
Right.
There is no biological or chemical line where the ocean stops and the wave begins.
The wave was never, for a single microsecond, separate from the ocean. The separation was entirely a visual illusion, a trick of form and movement.
Exactly. Joe uses this fluid dynamic to explain the human condition. We are the waves. Human beings appear wildly separate. We have different names, different genetic codes, different traumas, different aspirations. We look at each other across a room and see separate entities.
But at our deepest foundational layer, at the level of that silent, unchanging awareness we isolated earlier, we are made of the exact same divine substance.
Yes.
There is only one consciousness expressing itself through 8 billion localized human shapes.
A wave can become so obsessed with its own unique shape, so terrified of crashing on the shore, that it completely forgets it is the ocean. It suffers from the illusion of isolation.
Yeah.
But, and this is the crucial point, no matter how forgetful the wave becomes, it cannot actually stop being water.
We can forget our divine nature. We can get completely lost in the stress of paying taxes, the grief of a breakup, the terror of a pandemic. We can act out of deep destructive selfishness because we think we are isolated units competing for resources. But we cannot alter our fundamental reality. We are the ocean, temporarily pretending to be a person.
When you integrate this ocean and wave dynamic into daily practice, it completely redefines the core rituals of religion.
It totally flips the script on prayer. If God is not an old man on a throne judging you, then what are you doing when you pray? You aren't begging a distant monarch to change the weather or cure a disease.
Prayer ceases to be a petition. It becomes an act of psychological alignment. It is the practice of remembrance. It is the localized wave taking a moment to remember the vastness of the ocean it belongs to.
Joe writes a beautiful line here. Prayer is not changing God's mind. Prayer is changing ours. It's shifting our internal frequency away from the terror of separation and back into the truth of unity.
And meditation undergoes a similar transformation. Meditation is conventionally viewed as an arduous technique to climb a spiritual mountain to reach a distant state of enlightenment.
Right.
Joe realizes that meditation is simply sitting quietly enough to notice that you are already at the summit. The peace experienced in deep meditation isn't a reward beamed down from heaven. It is the natural default baseline of reality that reveals itself when the noisy illusion of separation subsides.
This radical reframing extends to his view of historical religious figures, specifically Jesus. And I find this fascinating because he doesn't cynically discard his Christian upbringing.
No, he does.
He doesn't say it was all a lie. He reinterprets the text through the lens of pure non-duality.
Yes. Conventional theology often isolates Jesus as a sole, unreachable exception to humanity, a divine anomaly whose primary function is to be worshipped from afar.
But Joe begins to see Jesus not as the exception, but as the supreme example, the ultimate prototype.
He sees Jesus as a human wave that never lost its conscious connection to the ocean, a localized form that was fully constantly aware of its infinite substance.
So when Jesus says, "I and the Father are one," Joe no longer reads that as a piece of exclusive theological dogma. He reads it as a literal, factual description of the physics of non-dual consciousness.
And the phrase, "the kingdom of heaven is within you," loses its futuristic afterlife connotations. It isn't the gated community you enter after physical death. It's the fundamental field of awareness residing behind your eyes right now.
Joe views the life of Jesus as a demonstration of humanity's ultimate potential for awakening. The source material argues that interpreting Jesus in this non-dual way doesn't diminish his legacy. It vastly magnifies it, turning a distant idol into a direct roadmap for our own consciousness.
It is a breathtaking philosophical shift. But philosophy means nothing if it doesn't change behavior. An internal realization of this magnitude creates a shock wave that must eventually ripple out into the physical world.
You can't unsee the ocean. When you realize the wave and the ocean are one, when you see that the frantic pursuit of wealth and status is just a game being played by illusions, how do you go back to running a business? How do you go back to arguing over inventory and profit margins?
You cannot. The psychological friction becomes unbearable. And this leads to the practical aftermath of the awakening. Joe and Kim didn't just sit on this profound knowledge. They initiated a radical simplification of their material lives.
They sell the essential grocery store business. They put their large mansion on the market. They intentionally dismantle the complex infrastructure of their previous life.
We must be very precise about the motivation here. The text makes it clear that this wasn't an act of religious asceticism.
Right, so it wasn't a moral rejection of capitalism. It wasn't some ascetic guilt trip where they decided wealth is inherently evil.
That's exactly it. It wasn't guilt. It was irrelevance. When your internal reality is anchored in the boundless, silent completeness of non-dual love, the external motivations that usually drive human behavior, the accumulation of capital, the maintenance of a large estate, the pursuit of social prestige, they simply lose their gravitational pull.
They become absurd. If the inner truth is boundless simplicity, maintaining a highly complex, ambition-driven outer life becomes an exhausting contradiction. Outer life must adapt to reflect inner truth.
And out of this simplified, deeply aligned life, Joe ultimately produces his book, Finding Nava.
Which introduces a massive, undeniable paradox into this whole story. I have to ask it. If the ultimate truth is truly beyond language, if words themselves are dualistic tools built on the assumption that a separate speaker is describing a separate object, then why write a book at all?
It's a fair question.
How can you use the tools of separation to teach unity? Why not just sit under a tree in silence for the rest of your life?
It is the eternal dilemma of the mystic. The moment you open your mouth to describe the truth, you have stepped away from it. Joe addresses this directly in the source material by invoking a classic ancient Zen analogy.
The finger pointing at the moon.
Yes. If I want to show you the moon, I point my finger at the sky. But if you stare exclusively at my finger, you will entirely miss the heavenly body I'm trying to show you. The finger is not the moon. It is just an indicator.
It's the map versus the territory. A printed map of New York City is not made of concrete, steel, and taxicabs. You can't fold it into a tent and live inside it. It isn't the reality. But if you are lost in Manhattan, that piece of paper is an incredibly useful tool to help you navigate toward your destination.
Exactly. Joe acknowledges that his words, his metaphors, his book, they cannot capture the blazing reality of the 4:18 a.m. awakening. The words are not the truth, but they serve as necessary pointers.
Breadcrumbs.
Right. They can guide the intellect to the very edge of the cliff. They cannot make you jump into the abyss of direct experience, but they can show you exactly where the cliff is located.
He writes, Finding Neve, fully aware that it is just a map, But he does it in the profound hope that his pointers might guide other exhausted seekers toward their own dissolution of the observer.
It is an act of deep compassion that flows naturally from the realization that every other person on the planet is literally just another localized expression of yourself.
What a monumental journey we have tracked today. Let's pull all these threads together. We started with a 14-year-old boy standing in a library looking at Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, terrified by the fact that the physical universe offers no solid ground.
We followed him through a 50-year global labyrinth of physics, philosophy, and comparative religion, watching him gather towering stacks of knowledge only to systematically shed them all.
We saw his questioning turn ruthlessly inward, realizing that the only constant in a universe of impermanence is the silent awareness witnessing the chaos.
Leading to that sudden explosive collapse at 4:18 a.m. in the midst of a global lockdown, where the artificial boundary between the observer and the observed simply vanished, leaving only a unified reality.
A reality entirely composed of love. Not a fleeting human emotion, but the foundational structural fabric of existence itself.
This raises an important question.
And I want to pose this directly to you, the listener, as we close this deep dive. Take a moment right now and think about whatever it is you are endlessly searching for in your own life. Maybe it's a sense of lasting peace. Maybe it's certainty about your future. Maybe it's a profound spiritual connection, or just the feeling that fundamentally you are going to be okay.
Consider the radical possibility that the separation you feel, the frustrating distance between you and the peace you seek, is merely an optical illusion generated by your mind.
What if you aren't an isolated wave fighting against the tide? What if the abandonment you fear is literally a physical impossibility because there is nowhere outside the ocean to be exiled to? Consider this final thought drawn straight from the culmination of Joe Bandra's 50-year quest. The journey ends not with finally finding what you are looking for, but with the sudden, quiet realization that what you were seeking was the one doing the seeking all along. The seeker and the sought are exactly the same thing.
The wave finally remembers its ocean.
Thank you so much for joining us into a truly singular life. We warmly invite you to keep questioning the nature of your reality, keep seeking the truth, and perhaps, just for today, take a few minutes to stop fighting the current and just be the ocean.